The war in Ukraine has already rewritten Europe's playbook on security, but there's one player that keeps surprising everyone. It isn't the United States with its endless stockpiles, and it isn't Germany with its late but massive military revival. No, the country that has been punching above its weight from day one is Britain. And now, with the right moves, London could tilt the conflict in a way that shocks both Moscow and its allies. This isn't empty hype. Britain has a track record of doing the unexpected when Europe is on fire. It stood alone against Hitler in 1940. It helped break Napoleon's empire at Waterloo. And today, after Brexit, many thought the UK would be too distracted or too isolated to matter. Instead, it's turned into one of Ukraine's loudest and most daring backers. From the very first days of the full-scale invasion, Britain didn't hesitate. While other countries were still debating what helmets to send, London was already airlifting thousands of next-generation anti-tank weapons to Kyiv. Those NLAWs became the bane of Russian armor in the suburbs of Bucha and Irpin, when images of burning Russian columns went viral worldwide. The message was clear. Britain was willing to cross the line quickly, and in doing so, it forced other allies to step up. But that was just the opening move. The real turning point came when Britain supplied Ukraine with Storm Shadow cruise missiles. Suddenly, targets deep behind Russian lines, command posts, ammunition depots, even bridges in occupied Crimea were no longer safe. For the Kremlin, that was a nightmare. For Ukraine, it was proof that Britain wasn't afraid to escalate when it mattered most. And that brings us to the core of this story, Britain's ability to keep raising the stakes. Because here's the truth, the war in Ukraine isn't just about who has more troops or tanks. It's about who is willing to break the next barrier first. And more often than not, that country has been Britain. The question now is, what comes next? One possibility is long-range weapons on an even larger scale. The Storm Shadows are powerful, but Britain could go further. It could help provide Typhoon fighter jets to Ukraine, either directly or by unlocking pilot training and maintenance support that makes them usable. Even if the UK doesn't hand over the jets itself, its leadership could make it politically impossible for others to keep delaying. That's how Britain changes wars, by being the first one through the door, dragging others behind it. Then there's the naval angle. Britain has one of Europe's strongest navies, and while its aircraft carriers aren't sailing into the Black Sea anytime soon, there's still a huge role to play. Ukraine's fight to keep its grain exports flowing isn't just a regional issue. It's a global food security crisis. Britain's Royal Navy has already been part of operations to escort shipments and train Ukrainian sailors. Expanding that role, from mine clearing to intelligence sharing in the Black Sea, could make Russia's blockade strategy collapse faster than Moscow is prepared for. But Britain's impact isn't only about weapons and ships. It's also about training and industry. Tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers have already been trained in Britain since the invasion began. That's not a side project. That's a new generation of fighters being shaped with NATO standards and tactics. And Britain's defense industry, led by giants like BAE Systems, is now planting roots in Eastern Europe, helping set up production so Ukraine can manufacture artillery shells and armored vehicles closer to the battlefield, in a war where ammunition is burned faster than factories can replace it. That kind of industrial backing is just as important as frontline firepower. And let's not forget London's other battlefield, finance. Russia's oligarchs don't care about sanctions in Brussels or speeches in Washington nearly as much as they care about London. The UK has long been a playground for Russian money, from luxury mansions in Kensington to football clubs in the Premier League. By tightening those financial nooses, Britain isn't just sending weapons, it's choking off the very wealth that fuels Putin's inner circle. Now, we can't ignore the nuclear shadow hanging over all of this. Britain is one of NATO's 3 nuclear powers, and while no one expects London to use them in Ukraine, the deterrence is real. Every time Britain provides a new system, Russia rattles the nuclear saber. But behind those threats is an uncomfortable truth for Moscow. The UK isn't easily intimidated. If anything, it seems to thrive on calling those bluffs, and that alone changes how far Putin can escalate. Yet, this is also a battle for leadership inside Europe. Germany is building the biggest military transformation since World War II, pouring hundreds of billions into tanks, submarines, and new bases. France, as always, talks about European autonomy, but struggles to turn speeches into concrete action. Britain, despite leaving the EU, has carved out a different identity, the nation that acts first and dares more. Whether it's symbolic or practical, that matters, because in war, perception is power. The contrast is clear. Berlin is finally throwing money at defense like it's a Black Friday sale. But for the first year of the war, its big contribution was heated tents and moral support. France can't decide whether it wants to be Europe's military leader or just keep making dramatic speeches about it. Britain, by comparison, has been less talk, more action. And that's not just reputation management, it's strategy. Every time London makes a move, it shifts the political Overton window for the rest of NATO. When the UK announced it would send Challenger 2 tanks, Germany's Leopards magically became available within weeks. When Britain sent Storm Shadows, suddenly long-range missiles were no longer unthinkable. This is the pattern. Britain steps first, others fall in line, and Russia gets fewer safe zones to hide in. For Moscow, it must feel like a frustrating game of chess where Britain keeps moving pawns that turn out to be queens. The bigger picture is this: Britain doesn't need to outspend the United States or outproduce Germany. It just needs to keep setting the tempo. Training programs like Operation Interflex have already put tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers through British boot camps. That's not charity work. That's rewriting Ukraine's military culture, giving it the kind of professionalism and tactical flexibility that makes Russia's Soviet-era doctrine look like a museum exhibit. The defense industry is another card Britain is playing smartly. BAE Systems has announced plans to manufacture artillery shells in Ukraine itself, alongside armored vehicle production in allied countries. This is more than logistics. It's about making Ukraine war-proof. Russia can hit supply lines coming from Poland, but it can't easily stop a factory inside Ukraine pumping out shells every day. That's the kind of move that doesn't make headlines, but wins wars. And let's not underestimate Britain's role as the banker of bad guys. For decades, London's financial system was the laundromat of choice for Russian oligarchs. Palaces, yachts, football clubs. Putin's inner circle loved parking their wealth in Britain. But when the war began, that same system became a weapon. Sanctions on Russian money in London are personal. They don't just target nameless accounts, they hit the assets oligarchs actually care about, the ones that buy their mistresses luxury flats in Mayfair. If you want to make Putin's cronies nervous, take away their property portfolio. And Britain has the keys to those houses. Russia, of course, falls back on its favorite script: nuclear threats. Every time Britain sends something new, Moscow warns of unpredictable consequences. The only unpredictable part is how seriously anyone still takes it. The truth is, Britain is one of the few countries Russia can't bluff. A nuclear-armed NATO member that's already survived the Blitz isn't going to fold because Moscow posted another angry statement. If anything, these threats only confirm that Britain is hitting the right nerve. Which brings us to the final point. The way Britain could ultimately reshape the Ukraine war isn't about one dramatic shipment or one bold naval move. It's about leadership. Russia's strategy relies on fear, delay, and hesitation. Britain's role has been to cut through all of that and act. And if London keeps doing it, the war's trajectory could shift faster than Moscow can adapt. So the final question is simple. When historians look back, will Britain be remembered as the country that once again changed the fate of a European war?